Doc, so how's the team looking ahead of round one?
Yeah, so we're going okay. We've got obviously one session to go tonight, but overall the whole pre-season's been really positive, and it's going to be good to get going. It's even though it's a short window that we have, it sort of feels like it's time. So I'm glad that we're ready to go.
Is there a fair bit of buzz around the group, given you've got so many new players who are going to making their debuts on the same day?
Yeah, so there's obviously some freshness around the group. That's probably been there from the start of pre-season, and it gets to that exciting time when a number of them will get to make their debut. So that is exciting.
How many are you expecting?
I'd reckon in a ballpark of 4 to 5 would be the sort of rough number.
Have you told any of those players?
Some of them have got a rough idea, yeah.
How was the news received?
Clearly they're really excited, and it's one of the really positive elements of being involved as a coach is to tell players they're in, and unfortunately on the same day you have the flip side where you tell players that they're out. So that day is challenging, but also for those that are in, it's very exciting.
Holistically, the team this year compared to this time last year, what improvements have you seen? What areas is your team better in going into round one?
Yeah, well, I think what we will notice is that the whole competition will be better. They came back in really good nick. They run better numbers off their off-season than they did the previous year, and obviously we've trained them pretty hard, so we feel that their fitness is good. Skill base wise, once again, a progression off the back of last year. I noticed that even in the off-season. The players that were playing some VFLW football, their skill level had maintained or risen again. So, but as I said, I think that will be competition wide. So while we're happy about that, I reckon all the teams would be saying the same thing to you.
Obviously, Aaron, I think, was really keen to get back as soon as possible. What's your time frame? Is it just a matter of trying to hold it back? Yeah,
no, well, I think we need to be mindful and realistic that as much as she wants to get back really quickly, as much as we want her back really quickly, it's ultimately going to be a medical decision. She'll be ready when the medicos say you've done all of the work and your knee is in the condition that it needs to be in order to play. So the speculation will remain, and that's okay, that's natural, but ultimately that decision's going to lie with the medical team.
If it was up to her, do you think she'd be playing this weekend?
I think she, even though she's probably driven and focused and wants to be there, she's also a pragmatic and a realist to know that there are medical staff there to guide us because they've got great expertise in the field. And while she's done one knee previously and come back, that's not probably as big a sample as the people that are dealing with her and who've seen multiple players go through this. So she'll be guided and we will be guided by them.
What about Chloe Shear? She had more food.
Yeah, so a pretty minor scope, but just had a little bit of irritation. They went in, they didn't find anything dramatic, which is really pleasing. So I don't envisage that's going to be a significant setback, but it clearly is a minor interruption to her rehabilitation.
I'll just ask one more.
Yeah.
Sorry, for her to come back, would there be we'll ease her in as a permanent full forward, or is it Erin is 100 or she's not playing?
She'll when she's available, she'll play probably exactly as she has always played. I think the risk profile of playing forward, back or middle is pretty similar in my view, so just let her play footy.
The 4 to 5 debutants will be playing tonight.
Yes.
You probably won't tell us who they
I
are
won't.
right now.
I won't.
So I knew you'd do that. Can you tell us though, maybe generally what?
Well, we've got 8 new players, and so you can narrow it to those 8.
Okay.
It'll be 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah.
What do you need to know?
What do you think they bring to the team?
Okay, yeah. So what's been super impressive has been that clearly they've had to start from scratch, whereas some of the other players have had 12 months or 3 years head start on them. But their uptake's been really quick, and they've engaged and interacted into the group really quickly. So what they'll bring, hopefully, is that they'll understand the system and what we want from them, and that they'll play their role. So, obviously it's going to be a first game. There'll be some nerves, and they'll probably make some blues, but we're hopeful that they'll feel comfortable out there and that they'll just play another game of footy. So we're not expecting anything radical, but we're just hopeful that they'll integrate well and have a nice day.
What about overall, Matthew, being the hunted this year, I guess? Does that
Who's the hunted?
Well, playing the premiers, how teams always come up to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting.
Mentality, or?
No, I don't think so. It's interesting, like that obviously gets thrown around a little bit, but from my perspective, the game starts and the players just react to the contest ahead of them. So I don't buy into it too much, to be honest. But that might get put around, and maybe some of our players are experiencing that. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in the way that they've approached their training or the way they've played the first 2 games. So we'll wait and see.
Given you were so dominant, especially in the final series, I think you won those 2 finals really easily. Do you expect opposing teams to have a very different, sort of defensive mindset against you guys? Like lots of different plans? Or?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Footy generally, there's a follow the leader type mentality which does occur, but I think the AFLW is a little bit different in that it's so dynamic and so changing year to year that you really can't use last year's form guide as a guide. It's just so many new players, 4 new teams, and so I'm sure there's teams that we come up against that we played last year will use that as some reference point. But the reality is, I think it'll be vastly different this season. I don't think last year will be much of a guide at all.
So can you set the agenda tactically then?
We'll just play the way we're going to play. I don't know. I mean, obviously we haven't got a lot to go on at this point. We've got 1 trial game that we've been able to have vision of and have a look at, and you pick out the odd thing out of that. But ultimately, the tactical side of the game is a fairly small component of any outcome, I reckon. So. Yes, there'll be tactics and strategy, but I don't think it's going to be a critical element in deciding who's going to win or lose.
You're able to run over a lot of teams last year. Do you expect the fitness of other sides to be maybe focused? Yeah, I'd imagine that the fitness level across the comp will go up. I know, as I said at the start, our group came back fitter, so that's pleasing. But I reckon if there was one thing, I'd suggest that across the comp, I'd envisage that there's going to be a higher fitness level, and I don't think that will necessarily be an automatic advantage. In fact, I'd be surprised if it is. So we'll see.
How are the 2 other girls that are injured, Ree Metcalf and Denny? How are they both travelling? Yeah, so both going well. Ree's probably perhaps the most progressed, obviously, of those 2, definitely. So she's reintegrating into the group, building into some contact work, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks she'll be fully integrated and then be available to play. Denny had the surgery. Surgery went well, nothing major. There was a few little things, but ultimately that was a really good outcome for us. We were really pleased with how minor the damage was in the end. So once again, medically directed, but she'll progress and hopefully be available at some point in the back end of the season. Well, the back end, so missing like the first 3 to 4 weeks.
I don't know, to be honest. It could be quicker than that, but I'm projecting that I'm not expecting to have her available. If she is, brilliant. If not, we'll move on.
Who's going to captain the team, Doc?
Yes, we've got 5. So I'm waiting for the rock, paper, scissors. I think they do have to submit something to the AFL, but I don't care, to be honest. I'm really comfortable with us having Erin and Chelsea as the captains and those 5 as on-field leaders. Someone will toss the coin.
Can you do it like the NFL where you send all 5 or 4 in?
Let's do it. Hey, why not? I'm up for it. I honestly don't know. I don't think it's particularly relevant. No.
So you're happy not having like a dedicated on-field captain?
Got 5.
Yeah.
5 leaders. Got 2 captains, 5 leaders. But I think it's semantics really. I don't think it's particularly relevant.
How do you think you stack up against Brisbane?
Yeah, so it should be a really good game. Their first scratch match got cancelled because of the weather, and so they played GWS in their second game, their first game, but GWS had already had a good hit out. So the first half of that game, GWS got on top of them, but the second half of the game was really even. So we played GWS, and that was a really good hit out for us. When I looked at the second half of the Brisbane GWS game, it was a pretty even tussle. If I think back, even though I've said you can't use history as a guide in this comp, in years 1 and 2, they made grand finals off pretty low expectations. So I envisage that they'll be up and about. And what I did note is their last quarter against GWS, they had real high intensity still going. So to speak to that fitness piece, I think they look like they're fit. So it's going to be a good matchup. Their tackle numbers are historically really high. They play a fairly contested brand, and hopefully we'll hold up all right in that space as well. So it should be a good game.
It's meant to be pretty wet.
Except that it might be a bit wet and greasy, yes.
Does it work against you guys a bit, given the way you move the ball? And
I don't think. It'll work against both teams in terms of the skill execution, but yeah, similarly, it is what it is. You know, potentially they've probably trained in hot and humid a little bit more than we have. So you'd maybe say that's a slight to their advantage. If I had to choose, would I choose a greasy day? Probably not. But if it is greasy, that's what we're playing. So it is what it is.